changing the final drive oil, and yeah, most excavators I've seen have an up, a level and a drain. Leave the level one in for the minute while you're emptying the reservoir. I undo the top one first, just to if there's any pressure in there. There shouldn't be pressure, but if there is, if it's hot, there will be pressure. So undo the top one first, and remove that completely. Cleanliness is really important with this job. You don't want to get any grit in there because these things cost a fortune to rebuild. Okay, now the bottom one, you just put a little ice cream container there. And try not to drop it into the container when oil comes pouring out. That oil's in pretty good condition. If it's all foamy and sort of white looking, you've got issues. That oil looks great. Oops. Normally I go around the other side and I'll do the other side while this drains out. It says you know, should really change it every 500 hours. Gee, that's in good, Nick, considering the amount, the kilometres that I've tracked in this machine. Mind you, I do it every 250 hours. This is what I was saying. It only takes about a litre of oil. It's very cheap, and just change it more often than you think you need to. I do it every 200 to 200, between 200 and 300 hours, or just whenever I can. Yeah, it just helps preserve these. I've actually had to rebuild one of these before. Well, I didn't rebuild it, but sent it away to get it rebuilt, and it cost $7,000. So, yeah, oil's cheap by comparison. Okay, now that it's slowed to a bit of a dribble, what I've done, I've just put a bit of masking tape around my air gun. I just like to try and sort of give her a squirt. It just helps to get all the extra oil out. So that oil's in brilliant condition, which I'm happy about. The drain plug back in, and you leave the top one out. These are on a tapered thread. I don't like to over tighten them. Okay, so now we take the level one out. It's always a pain doing this, because if you just fill up the funnel, and it starts to pour out of the drain, out of the overflow. Okay, there we go. So now it's time for my least favourite job, draining the engine oil and changing the oil filter. Taking the top cap off the engine. Yeah. Okay, so we're 3/4 full. Okay, so I'm going to say that that's okay. I'll run it for a little bit longer and just check it again, but that's pretty good. Oops. Okay, so we know that the area underneath underneath the hydraulic pump, underneath the valve bank, and underneath the diesel and hydraulic tanks there's leaks. I've got a couple of them, I'm absolutely certain, but I'm certain that this is one that I'm missing. So what I've done is, these are all the nuts and bolts, the bolts that were around the bottom undercarriage that I've pointed out in previous videos that had oil drips from them. They're completely cleaned and solvent, there's not one drop of oil on them. These are the plates that go underneath the machine. They're all totally clean, no oil on them whatsoever. Now I'm going to take you outside. It's as windy as all get out and noisy, so I'm going to yell because this is fundamental to finding this elusive leak. So, done another major clean inside the valve bank in here. Cleaned all of the floor area that I can, so if a leak appears, it's going to run along that clean floor and I'll be able to spot it, at least where it comes from, at least the region. That's about all I can hope for at the minute, is to find the sort of localized area where it is leaking, if there is a leak. Also at the pump, as you can see, the floor's out of the machine under there. So the floor's out and that pump's totally clean on the top and bottom. Yeah, so any loose hose or fitting that's in there, it will show a drip. Now I'm going to get under the machine. I should have had my phone with me. Okay, so there's no cover underneath the valve bank, so we can't access that there. So there's the hydraulic drain plug, the hydraulic tank drain plug, and there's the diesel tank. So I'm pretty certain that leak's not going to be coming from there. Zoom out. So that's underneath the hydraulic pump and all of the hosing that runs through into the valve bank area. So I'm going to run the machine now for half an hour or so and just use all the levers, and it's dry. I've high pressure cleaned it as best I can, blown it off with compressed air, and it's dry. So I'm about 95% certain that there's no leaks, unless it's coming from an area where I'm not looking. But yeah, I'm looking in the region where it was showing signs of wetness. So there's nothing dripping now. It's dry as. Yeah, just that little bit of doubt in my mind that I haven't actually solved it. But anyways, one job that's not on the list, which I want to do, is I want to clean out inside these final drive motors. I don't know if you can hear me, so I'm yelling into the camera. Okay, see all that dirt and rubbish that builds up in there? In behind here, there's a duocone seal. And if you've got dirt and grime build up so high, it actually starts affecting the seal. So I'm going to clean all that out with a high pressure cleaner, and yeah, that caused, on one machine I had, it caused me to, it was just chockers, it was just caked in, and eventually the duocone seal let go. So I'm just going to clean them out. It's an easy job, won't take long. So it's all nice and clean in there now. wreck me camera. Me. So after yesterday's windstorm blowing this camera over, this quite an expensive camera, it doesn't focus now. I can't zoom in and zoom out. What a shit day it was yesterday, boys. After the wind storm yesterday, I had to pull the pin at about 4:30. I actually got covered in bloody hydraulic oil. I wanted to drain 10 litres of hydraulic oil out of the system, out of the bottom of the system, just in case there's any water or any gritted nasties in the bottom of the tank. And the bolt was so tight I had to use a rattle gun. Like I was standing as far away as I could, and because I just knew, like, your reaction time's not that good, and I was like, bang, and now next minute, it's only got a really short thread on the bolt, and so the bolt came out, so I was losing oil into the bucket, which was what I intended, but I had to then shake the rattle gun out, get the plug, and then push it back up in there and find it, and oil just pouring all over my arm, and it was actually squirting towards me. It was horrible. Fuck, it was horrible. So I've only got a few things left on the list. I want to dump all the radiator coolant. So, but I just want to clean out all the fins with air and just make sure it's all nice and clean. Put a fresh belly full of coolant in there. I want to reinstall all the covers, especially underneath, and all of the body covers. Get that door on, and going to get a new wiper blade. It's never had one. I don't really use a wiper anyway because the windows are generally up. But on these, I've got 3 buckets that have size 45 pins. So I have to cut these bushes off, remove those pins, and with the plasma cutter, I need to open up those holes to 50mm. I've got new 50mm pins and bushes down there to collect, and yeah, so I've got 3 buckets to modify. The full service has been done, and it was just a case of just swapping out filters, and it's quite straightforward. And then that's pretty much it, guys. Back to work. Ah, see, look at that. Okay, all of the fins up here, it's all covered in dirt and stuff. It's not a good thing. Clean that up, because the last thing I want is this machine overheating. It gets really hot here in summer, so yeah. And I noticed that the hydraulic oil seems to be running quite at a high temperature, so that's the reason right there. Very good. Well, that's a good discovery. So I had to strip this whole compartment out again. Look at all this. I want to move that air conditioning condenser, get it out of the road, and get the high pressure cleaner in behind there. That's, I think, the hydraulic oil coolant. Oh my goodness. Look at all that. Years of dust and dirt, neglect. I thought I was recording, but I wasn't. Okay, so we've got the condenser off. It's there. We've just sort of leaned it forward. Now this is the actual radiator on the right hand side there, and on the left hand side we've got our hydraulic oil cooler. And that, as you can see, is completely gummed up. There's no airflow getting through that at all. when you're sitting in the machine, and the seat's lower of course, and that lever's down, your leg actually rests against there, because the seat's an air rider seat, and your leg rests against there, and it's just insanely hot. Now I've only noticed it over the past 6 months, but that's the reason. The oil is just too hot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dump all of that hydraulic oil, because if it's that hot, it probably loses its viscosity. I'm going to wash that out completely, clean that out. Fresh belly full of hydraulic oil. Okie dokie. Well, that's a great discovery, because I just wasn't even expecting to find that. I mean, all I set about this morning to do was to drain the coolant and replace the coolant. But what a great discovery. Okay, so we're all as clean as we can get it, really. I don't want to put any brushes on that. I don't want to dent the little filaments. I'm just going to dump the coolant, and there's a little tap there. Out she comes. I'll take the radiator cap off, which is in there under a cover which has been removed. Take that off. Okay, so I'm going to just squirt that out with air and dry it all out, and give it just once over with a rag, clean rag. All of this stuff had to come off. Fire extinguisher, that. There's some cover. That's the covers for the radiator cap. That bottom grate had to come off. Underneath that cover in there is the ECU, I think it's called. Yeah, it's the ECU, or the computer. All of this stuff. So she was pretty involved to get to all of this stuff, but well and truly worth it. Had to loosen the air filter off to get to the creature. Because I'm not really a mechanic, I don't really know what's involved in a really good service, but common sense sort of said check the radiator and check the coolant, and once I started having a look at it I thought, Jesus, lucky I did. Okay, so we've got that top cover on with the fire extinguisher. Now I'm just starting back into this area here. Oops. Oh, well, you've seen me do everything else. So batteries in, then I've got to put the door locking mechanism on and the grease gun container, and that's it. So I won't film that. I don't know if you recall earlier in the piece I was talking about the automatic idle, where it worked perfectly when the machine was, you know, cold, and you know, halfway through the day it would start playing up. And what the situation was, what was happening was, I'm thinking that the oil was so hot that it was affecting the sensor that was controlling the automatic idle. So I'm tipping, like, I haven't investigated it, but I'm tipping that problem has now come to be cured. Gone into the air filter. So there's good suction there. And I can hear the air racing through the thinness of the radiator. I haven't heard that. I can't ever remember hearing that, but there's a noticeable difference in the sound. So it turns out horns are not weatherproof. This one I had to just cut the wires off because it's got a special Hitachi type plug. Just tested the horn and it wasn't working. I've gurneyed it, you know, I've been gurneying in there and it's been copping a hiding. I should have unplugged it, but I didn't. So I had to go down to Autobahn and bought a just a generic 24 volt horn. I'll just test it. She works. Fantastic. And that spotty works too, which was my big concern because that one got drowned. Horn works, spotty works, excellent. bit hard with the sun glare, but you get the picture. Wow, that's awesome. Track's a bit loose, so I'll give that a bit of a tighten up. So inside there we've got a little grease nipple. It looks like it's pointing downwards, which is a pain, but that's okay. So this track is, you know, realistically probably just a smidgen too loose. I like to have about 60 to 80 mil sort of slack underneath that bottom roller. I've got to try and rotate that grease nipple a little bit. I'll give it a clean. And there we go. The place is a hell of a mess at the minute, so there's mud everywhere. I don't know if you can sort of see all this stuff here. And got a little bit of a water trap there. I'm going to do a bit of excavation around this place. Had to pull all the covers off again. I'm going to operate it for the morning again. I suspect this hose is a little leaky. After about 4 hours we got a little bit of oil built up underneath there, just a little bit, but I'm going to try and zoom in on this, and that bolt at the bottom of the fuel gauge, can you see the glistening, see how it's glistening underneath that viewing lens? See that little glistening colour there? That is oil dribbling out of there. So I gurneyed it last night again. So I'm hoping, and it's in the region, and it was coming out the bottom there. So it's in that region. So I've got to take all this stuff off to get to that bolt. Hopefully it's just loose, and tighten that up. I'll leave all the covers off and I'll run it for another couple of hours and see if I've got all the oil leaks. Okay, so from the top I managed to get a spanner onto that bolt there, and the one at the top. They were both loose, really loose. So I've tweaked them up, and what I need to do now is I've taken all the covers off, as you can see again. The arm that holds this filter, and that's actually part of the frame for the cover. It's it's only got one bolt at the bottom here. Once you bolt all the covers on, it makes it all rigid. So I've had to make up a bracket to just prevent that from, because I want to operate the machine without the covers on. Well, we've cured that leak. It's no longer leaking from that viewing glass. There was another spot that I was curious about. It was this hose here, because it's got like a little hairline split in it. Okay, and you can sort of see it. It's just marginally wet around there. But the real offender is the one right beside it. That's leaking. It's leaking out of the crimp. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to replace those two hoses. They're really easy to get to. They run out. They're actually the 2 quick hitch lines. They're probably only around about 1.5 meters long, so they're not going to be too expensive. So I'm going to replace them today. And that is pretty much it. I'll take you underneath the machine. Now, this main hose from the bottom of the tank to the pump, that fitting was a little bit loose, and I did notice it was just marginally damp and wet around that that arm there, or that pipe. Just a little bit wet around there, so I tightened that off. That was quite loose. And I did its sister down the other end there. That was also quite loose. Like, you know, I don't know what sort of pressure's inside that hose, but and there's still no. I've only run it for about 1.5 hours, and we were getting wet around there, but that was, I'm sure, from the viewing gauge. So I'm tipping that is all of my leaks. Clean as a whistle. Oh, beautiful. Not one drop. That's awesome. So it's a good day. Oil leaks are solved.